Is your head constantly aching from the existential pressure of student loan debt? Do you salt your meals with tears as you worry about your personal mountain of unpaid loans? Are you ducking and dodging mail from your loan provider on a daily basis? If most of your answers to these questions were yes, then you may need student debt cancellation, potentially coming to a White House near you on January 20th. Call 1-800-DEBT-SUCKS for the results you need.
It's the Joelle Show.
Hello, and welcome to the Joelle Show. After a long hibernation in quarantine, I have returned. And today we'll be talking about none other than
student loan.
So you've probably seen some headlines recently that the Biden administration may support some level of cancellation for federal student loans. And you may also be wondering, how would that work? Who's going to pay for it? Where do I get in line? Well, you've come to the right place. But first, a short disclaimer.
The following information is not financial tax or legal advice and should not be taken as such. If you need professional financial tax or legal advice, please consult a financial advisor, an accountant, or a lawyer.
Whew, okay, now that that's over with, let's dive in. So student loans were already a huge issue before the pandemic. Student debt in the U.S. has more than quadrupled from $370 billion in 2005 to $1.68 trillion in 2020. Trillion dollars. And college tuition has just grown year over year, but affordability for middle and low-income families has become less and less manageable. Part of the problem is that wages for these families have not grown at the same rate, and at the same time, federal funding for financial assistance sources like Pell Grants has also decreased. So the CARES Act, which is what brought people the first stimulus check, froze student loan payments as well as interest until January 31st of 2021. But what happens when January 31st comes? Well, many political advocates are lobbying for the Biden administration to cancel the first $50,000 of student loans that have been issued by the federal government. But how might this happen, you ask? I will tell you. So there are two potential ways that the government could cancel student debt. The first would be where a student cancellation proposal would go into a bill that would then become a law via Congress. You may have watched that one Schoolhouse Rock video that sings about how a bill becomes a law. That's how that would work. The other way would be via executive order, where President-elect Biden would probably order the Secretary of Education or the Department of Education to cancel a certain amount of student loans because they're the ones that have the legal authority to issue student loans, according to Harvard Law School. So now you're probably wondering, do I have a federally issued student loan? Well, if you have a student loan, it's likely that it is federally issued because more than 90% of all student loans are federally issued. But you can also call the Federal Student Aid Information Center, FSAIC, at this number and ask them if your loan is issued by the federal government and just get more information about it. So Biden has said publicly that he's probably not going to use an executive order. That's probably because he thinks he'd get sued a lot. There would be a lot of legal challenges. So if this does happen, I would expect that it's going to go the bill Congress route, which is going to take a lot longer. But there is support from both Democratic and Republican parties. So it's still possible that it could happen. But right now it's just kind of like a unbaked orphan cookie that doesn't really have an oven to go into. Next question. If this does happen, how much debt would I get taken off and who would be eligible for student loan cancellation? So you may have heard this $50,000 number get thrown around a lot, but Joe Biden has actually only publicly supported $10,000 cuts for all student loan borrowers. And the reasoning for this is that there's a lot of research that backs up that $10,000 cut number. College Board has published that 55% of all student borrowers owe $20,000 or less. And the Center for American Progress has stated that of those people who default on their loans, meaning that they're not able to pay their loans back and then their credit gets totally wrecked because of that, most of them owe $10,000 or less. So a lot of people think that if we cut $10,000 of student debt, that would have a big impact for a lot of people and would also probably be more likely to actually get passed in Congress. But Democratic Senators Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer are pushing really hard for $50,000 of student loan cancellation. And the reason for that is because it would wipe out a huge amount of all federally issued student loans. 70% of all federally issued student loans would get cut if we cut $50,000. And it would have a really big impact on economic inequality and the racial wealth gap. Both of these things were already bad before the pandemic, but have only gotten worse during COVID. In terms of who would be eligible, most proposals I've seen so far would have cuts across the board for anybody who has student loan debt, which would be great for everyone. But there are also people who are saying that we should prioritize those who are the most financially vulnerable. Unfortunately, many politicians think that the $50,000 cut would probably not have that much support, and that's because of the cost, which brings me to my next point. But first, this has been a lot of information, and I think we need a dance break. Let's dance.